I want to say good afternoon to everyone and thank you all for being here. I am Jean Farmer Butterfield, a state representative for District 24, representing and serving Wilson County. I want to welcome the Divine Nine for our fourth annual Legislative Day at the North Carolina General Assembly. Well, the question becomes, who are the North Carolina Divine Nine, of which I am a member? There are 9 historically black Greek letter organizations that make up the National Panhellenic Council. These sororities and fraternities are each rich in history and have chapters across the world, each founded at different times and many starting on different college and university campuses across the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to welcome all of you here to the People's House, your house, the North Carolina Legislature, and indeed this press conference. And we have a program that we're going to follow very closely. So I want to introduce Tijuana Manners. Thank you. Come forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Butterfield. It is quite a pleasure and honor to be here on this day, May 15th, for our fourth annual Divine Nine Legislative Day. Our purpose here is not static, it is dynamic, it is ever-changing, and it won't stop today. Our purpose here is to ensure that the elected officials that work here in the People's House understand what the Divine Nine, the collection of the Divine Nine organizations, what our priorities are, and not only that, what our expectations are. And what I want to provide and explain quickly is our high-level 6 key focus areas that we have focused on this year. We came together as a Divine Nine organization, and these are the areas that we intend to ensure that our elected officials understand what our expectations are underneath these themes and understands that this is what we are going to be talking about in our communities across all of North Carolina. As you heard Representative Butterfield mention, we represent the areas all the way from as far east as the Outer Banks, all the way as far south as Lumberton, far north as Reedsville, and far west as West Carolina University. We represent all corners of this great state of North Carolina. The 6 themes collectively that we decided that we want to focus on this year, 2019-2020, this is not in any particular order of importance because they all impact the communities that we represent. Economic empowerment and housing justice is the first theme. Under that, a few areas that we want to focus on is ensuring we have increased funding for the Housing Authority, decreased barriers of entry into entrepreneurship for small and minority business owners, ensure we've got adequate funding for the North Carolina Housing Financial Agency. That's the first theme. The second theme is access to quality education. We understand the importance of education for all peoples, especially people of color and minorities. Under that, you have elimination of long-term suspension. We want to ensure we have proper funding for social workers and school counselors and nurses for all schools, regardless of the title classification of said school. We want to fund broadband internet access for all schools across all counties of North Carolina. The third theme is affordable and accessible health care. That includes Medicaid expansion coverage. That includes ensure we focus on behavior and mental health for all people of North Carolina. Fourthly is criminal justice, police reform, and gun reform. Strengthen gun laws to prevent accessibility to dangerous and unstable individuals. It's almost happening weekly now. We're hearing about an unfortunate incident that involves gun violence in this country. That also addresses proper access to body camera footage. That also addresses appropriately funding the Violence Against Women Act. A various number of topics under criminal justice, police reform, and gun reform. Fifthly is voting reform. We want to make sure that we count incarcerated individuals at their pre-incarcerated address for redistricting purposes. We want to make sure we've got voter registration for all young people automatically when they turn 18. Those are just a number of areas under voter reform that we want to focus on. And finally, and not least, U.S. Census 2020. We want to ensure that all people across the state of North Carolina are counted appropriately for the U.S. Census 2020 that is coming up. That is the focus for the Divine Nine this year. This is very dynamic, and our intent is to be extremely focused and extremely determined to make sure everybody in the General Assembly understands our focus areas for 2019 and 2020. With that said, we do want to open it up for Nicole Dozier. She's with the Assistant Project Director of Health Advocacy Project to talk about healthcare expansion. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here today with Divine Nine, nine organizations with different founders. We have different histories, different noble traditions, but we have a common purpose. All of our sororities and our fraternities were started to better ourselves, to better our people, and to better our communities. We are committed to lead and we're committed to serve. We lift as we climb. I'm here as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and as a healthcare advocate. We are facing some challenging times in our state and in our country. But as that great Alpha Phi Alpha brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The challenge we face is that more than 500,000 of our neighbors, our brothers and our sisters in North Carolina, are struggling with health issues like heart disease and diabetes and cancer and mental health and substance use disorders. But they lack the insurance necessary to access treatment, and they lacked the access to preventive care. This is because our state has not closed the Medicaid coverage gap. It's important for you to remember and to tell your friends and neighbors and elected officials that not all people who work qualify for Medicaid, who earn low incomes. Children often do qualify for Medicaid. Pregnant women qualify, although not for long enough. But many parents who work at child care centers, who work at nursing facilities, who stock shelves with the goods that we all purchase, earn too much for Medicaid and too little for private health insurance. And if you don't have children, guess what? It's even harder to qualify for coverage. We have not kept our promise either to the 12,000 veterans who are in the Medicaid coverage gap. This must change. The state has an opportunity, though, to close the gap in this coverage. Federal funds will cover 90% of the cost, and hospitals and insurance companies covering 10%. This makes financial sense. It makes moral sense. We have seen red states and blue states close the Medicaid coverage gap. North Carolina's people now are feeling that we are in the mean-spirited minority that refuses covering working families. But it's too easy to blame our elected officials for this decision. Our politicians just represent we the people. So if our elected officials don't represent us, then we need to talk to more friends and more neighbors. We need to make more calls. We need to march and we need to vote. As a famous Omega Psi Phi brother, Reverend Jesse Jackson, has pointed out, an organized minority can be a political majority. This is the year to close the coverage gap. This is the legislative session. This is the time. And as my Delta Sigma Theta soror, Marion Wright Edelman, said, it's time for greatness, not for greed. It's time for idealism, not ideology. It's time not just for compassionate words, but it is time for compassionate action. It's time to expand Medicaid. Thank you. Oh, up next is Senator Mohammed.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Senator Mujtaba Mohammed, and I proudly serve you in the North Carolina State Senate, representing Senate District 38 in Mecklenburg County. Thank you all for so much for joining us at your Capitol today. Thank you to today's stakeholders for holding the line for our HBCUs and the future of our great state. I am a proud graduate of the North Carolina Central University School of Law. It's because of the great education that I received, and now I'm able to serve my community as a proud public interest attorney in North Carolina. Here in the North Carolina General Assembly, we're fighting for equitable funding for our HBCUs. We are challenging the partisan gerrymandering that has split A&T, Winston-Salem University's campuses, and we're working with our partners like Spread the Vote to get state IDs into the hands of every eligible voter. But I need for you to remain engaged in the process. We need you every step of the way. The future of our state depends on our actions today. And with that, I want to thank our very own Johnson C. Smith in Charlotte. I want to thank Shauna, Kamaria, Senator Smith for your very hard work organizing the rest of our wonderful North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus and our sororities who are joining us today. So thank you for your time.
So at this point in time, what we'll do is open it up for any Q&A for a few minutes. Again, we'll open up for any Q&A, and I invite any of the leaders that are standing behind me to assist in answering any questions if your heart compels you to move. Any questions? Well, there's several issues here, right? One is increasing funding for the housing authority, right? We understand that this begins on a local level, and we're seeing it across all the communities where we know, based off a district, that certain districts in our communities are getting that support and that funding on a local level, and others are not. And what we're realizing is majority of that is the poor areas within our state. And so we want to make sure we've got focus, make sure we understand what areas need help, and make sure that they know to ask to get that funding. That's just one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is we want to, and we don't key on this much, is making sure we're increasing funding for minority business owners and helping make it easier for small businesses to have access to funding, understand how to get funding, and understand how to operate longer than that 3-year threshold. 'Cause, majority of our businesses fail within that first 3 years. So that's part of economic empowerment and housing justice. Any other thoughts on that? Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Don't be bashful. Right. So one thing that we've noticed is once individuals are incarcerated, for one, when they come out, they don't have adequate support to find a place to stay. They don't even, the last thing they're worried about is getting proper address and getting registered to vote. It's the last thing they're worried about. So we need to make sure that we have a support system in place to make sure, one, make it easier for them to get access to vote, make it easier for them to get access to voter IDs. And a part of that is making sure that they have on record their last address before they got incarcerated. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I was just talking to one of my fellow leaders before we came in. That's got to be a focus area, not only for us, but just for all citizens, is to make sure that we're going into these high schools and getting them as right before they turn 18 and taking them to register to vote. And not only that, teaching them about voter education, teaching them about the system of voting and how to vote and how to properly get engaged and understand what you'll be involved with and exposed with at these precincts. So I didn't learn that at 18. I was 25, 26, 27, 28 before I got exposed to that, and that's very unfortunate. And we've got to prevent that. We've got to get in these high schools, get in these colleges, universities, and make sure they understand the whole process from the beginning to the end. Absolutely, without question. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to commend and thank the Divine Nine for the excellent job they've done today in coordinating and planning and making this Divine Nine Legislative Day very, very successful. And I've been here since 2003, and I have not seen any group come in and be as focused and as organized as you are. And to be 600 strong says a great deal about what your focus is, and your legislative priorities are important. And indeed, all the citizens in the state of North Carolina should benefit from the legislative priorities that you've shared with us today, and not just the Divine Nine. So I commend you for thinking about those who cannot speak for themselves, and indeed those that can speak for themselves but could not be here today. And may you live out your theme, which is legacy, unity, and advocacy for this legislative day to move North Carolina indeed forward as the great state that we know it is and will continue to be with our support and help and advocacy. Thank you.